Hey guys, welcome to part 9, and let's just jump right into it. I know in part 8 I promised we'd talk about benign and malignant bone tumors. So today we're going to cover bone tumors. They're not extremely high yield, but they do come in testing situations now and then, and I feel like just knowing a couple key facts could snag some points on tests. So that's what we're going to run through. So starting off with benign bone tumors. So bone tumors really come in two major flavors, osseous and cartilaginous. So either most of the tumor is made of bone or most of the tumor is made of cartilage. So let's run through the osseous predominant bone tumors first that are benign. Then we'll do the benign cartilaginous. We'll flip over to malignant in a second, or the dangerous ones. Okay, so benign, not terrible. You're going to be probably okay. Not likely to metastasize. These are osteoid osteomas, okay? Osteoid osteomas are part of our bone class, bone tumor class that is predominantly bone. So you'll see these like to start with osteo. And then in these bone tumor classes, osteoid osteoma is really well known for happening in two specific places. It's going to happen in the cortical bone, so it's predominantly cortical, it means towards the apex of the bone. It's usually smaller than 2 centimeters, so if you see a big whopping tumor on the test, it's not likely to be osteoid osteoma. It's small. I like to remember this one as like kind of an owl, a cute innocent owl. You know, it's a small creature. It has those big eyes that look like 2 O's, which remind me of osteoid osteoma. And the one key thing to remember here is that there's severe nocturnal bone pain. So that's how you use the owl mnemonic. And it does respond to NSAIDs. Okay, that's the main differentiator from our other tumor, which is osteoblastoma. So osteoid osteoma, it's a small tumor. It likes to happen in the cortical bone. Where in the cortical bone? Particularly in the metaphysis and the diaphysis. Okay, so the diaphysis is the long part of the bone. The metaphysis is kind of the intermediary part of the bone. It's in the middle. You can remember M for middle, and then the epiphysis is at the end. So metaphysis is where the growth plate is. So you can remember it that way. So it's in the long part of the bone, the metaphysis, not the diaphysis, the metaphysis, which is kind of the longer section. So you can remember it as kind of like a, you know, it's on National Geographic, sometimes they have those fat owls and those really skinny ones. This owl is definitely a skinny one. It's a diaphysis owl. It's a metaphysis owl, okay? And what you'll see on kind of X-ray, which is high yield here, is this kind of radiolucent, not radio opaque, radiolucent tumor, which has surrounded by some sclerotic tissue. Usually it'll be close to the cortex of the bone. And now, so we were comparing it with osteoblastoma. Osteoblastoma is also a cortical tumor of the bone, but it's bigger than osteoid osteoma. It's large. It's going to be greater than 2 centimeters. It's usually found on the vertebrae, so if you're going to get a picture, it's going to be vertebral most likely. Now don't depend on that, but a good chunk of the imaging are vertebral images, okay? And this one has severe chronic pain that's not nocturnal, and it is responsive to NSAIDs. So it's unresponsive to NSAIDs. So you can remember here, let's just go through it one more time. Osteoid osteoma, smaller than 2 centimeters, right? It's going to be in the metaphysis and the diaphysis, the long part of the bone, not the ends. It's responsive to NSAIDs, and it's nocturnal bone pain. You can remember N in nocturnal and N in NSAIDs as responsive, okay? It's a positive N. And then osteoblastoma, just blast that away. We are unresponsive to NSAIDs. We're in the vertebra. We're having chronic pain throughout the day, not just at night. Okay, so blast, you can think of blast as a blast of light. It's in the day. It's not going to respond to what you throw at it. and it's going to blow your spine up. All right. Giant cell tumors. So giant cell tumors, these are also known as osteoclastomas. So they're made of osteoclasts. And when an osteoclast tumor is formed, or a giant cell tumor, you're going to have it form this big soap bubble-like appearance with all these holes, and that just indicates that the osteoclasts are overactive. So you're going to get rank L expressing osteoclasts in your tumor, which are just going to degrade your bone. And this is terrible because it's locally aggressive. You'll usually see this one at the end of bone, epiphyseal tumor, okay? Or usually around the end of the knee. So if you see an epiphyseal tumor at the knee, you can put a little bit of money on it saying it's a giant cell tumor, osteoclastoma, rank L ligand. Remember those key facts, okay? Osteoma. Osteoma is a good one because it sounds, it sounds pretty plain. It's easy to forget. So this kind of tumor it arises not from osteoclasts like our giant cell, it arises from osteoblasts, okay? And this one's unique because in the other ones you have really young people kind of affected, are osteoblastoma, osteoid osteoma. Those can be anywhere from 10 to 20 years old. But in this one, it's a disease of middle age. So you'll see your people in your 40s, your 50s, osteomas, okay? These like to form in the facial bones, specifically the paranasal sinus. So if you have a nose bone tumor, you have osteoma until, I guess, proven otherwise, okay? And it's associated with our Gardner's syndrome. Remember, Gardner's syndrome is in the family with FAP, familial adenomatous polyposis. It's one of those extracolonic manifestations of FAP. So do a colonoscopy if you see a bone tumor in the nose. That's how they're going to test this most likely, all right? Bone tumor nose, scope in the butt. Really quick, just solves all your problems. Next we have our cartilaginous tumors, right? Let's talk about cartilaginous tumors. Cartilaginous tumors include enchondromas, osteochondromas, chondroblastomas. So remember, these are predominantly cartilaginous, so they're going to start with chondro instead of osteo. Enchondromas. These are tumors that arise from hyaline cartilage. That's the stuff that lines our synovium of our bones, okay? And usually this is kind of a tumor that arises in the long bones of the hand. So if you see a hand tumor, just like with osteoblastoma that blasts your spine, enchondroma destroys your long bones of the hands, the metacarpals. This is a very handy tumor, okay? Enchondroma. And this is usually pretty asymptomatic. You're most likely not going to detect this in any kind of early stage. You can have some widening predisposition to fractures, things like that. So those are the main factors to know. Just being able to diagnose it is I think what they're kind of looking for. Then you let orthopedics do their thing if they need to. Okay, next, chondroblastoma. This is pretty rare, so chance of testing is not so high because it's one of the rarer ones. And this is going to happen on the epiphysis of the long bone, and it's just going to present with joint pain, swelling. It's very non-specific. Then we have osteochondroma. Osteochondroma is a bony tumor with a big cartilage cap. So if you see kind of on imaging a little polypy thing coming out of the bone, it has a big cap on it made of different appearing material on x-ray. That's cartilage, and that's an osteochondroma. It's also known as cartilaginous exostosis. So this happens in the metaphysis of the long bones. It's going to be not quite near the end, not quite at the end, but in the middle, right between the diaphysis and the epiphysis. That's where our metaphysis is. And this is the most common primary benign bone tumor. So most likely, if you see a polypy thing, two separate materials coming out of the metaphyseal area of the bone, it's an osteochondroma. Osteo and chondro kind of sharing their equal parts in forming this tumor. Okay, let's go now through some malignant ones. I think we've covered a good chunk of our benign ones. So malignant tumors: Ewing sarcoma, osteosarcoma, and chondrosarcoma. So we have our sarcomas. Our sarcomas are our malignant ones. So if you see an S for sinister, it's going to be S for oh shit, because this is malignant bone tumor territory. Ewing sarcoma. So this one can be found in children. It can be found in adults. It's in the diaphysis of the long bone. So it's right dab in the center. And you see this thing called onion skinning. Now, nothing really, they love to describe things with fruits and vegetables in radiology. So onion skinning, what it kind of means is you'll see multiple layers of the bone on x-ray. So you'll see little lines that kind of form a skin, something like a cross-section of an onion skin. Okay, and then we have don't worry, we'll dive a little bit deeper into each of these in a second. But just for a quick overview, we have osteosarcoma. This is an adolescent tumor. It's in the metaphysis. So Ewing's is in the diaphysis. Osteosarcoma is in the metaphysis of the long bones. Remember, our Osteochondroma is also a metaphyseal tumor. Don't confuse that with Osteosarcoma. Okay, it has that sunburst appearance, the Codman's triangle. This is when kind of the cortical bone gets peeled off because the tumor is growing too quickly, and you have the sunburst and the Codman's triangle forming. So if you ever see kind of a ramp forming in the bone, your osteosarcoma is of pretty high suspicion. And the 5-year survival rate is pretty good in this one, 70%. So not great, not terrible. Chondrosarcoma. Chondrosarcoma is usually an adult bone tumor. It's found in the pelvis, the ribs, proximal femur. You can't really nail it down to a specific area. So the classic finding here is a moth-eaten appearance. Now, what does a moth-eaten appearance even mean? You know, so if you see a picture of it, it's really a little bit. What they might try to do is try to trick you with a giant cell tumor differentiation, because the giant cell tumor has a kind of bubbly appearance, soap bubble appearance, and they'll try to confuse you with the moth-eaten appearance of chondrosarcoma. So moth-eaten, you'll see just the superficial part of the bone, the cortical part. It's going to look like it has small chunks in it. It's not going to be specifically a circular tumor. It's going to look like a moth started eating out of the bone. Instead of, for example, our giant cell tumor. In our giant cell tumor, we have a big round ball that looks like it has a bunch of bubbles in it. So that's one of the differentiators there. Okay, so let's dive into these tumors a little bit more in detail. I think it will be kind of helpful if we just go through each one with a few more key points, because we just glanced over them quickly. So Ewing's is very malignant, right? It's it's one of those tumors that has a specific mutation associated with it, which is the EWSR1. It's found on chromosome 22. Watch out for that. This is a tumor of boys, okay? Patrick Ewing, a basketball player, I think, had the number 22 as his jersey, so I think you can remember it using that if you're a basketball fan. Or you can watch the sketchy. That's what I did. This is a primary tumor of the diaphysis, or the long part of the bone, okay, particularly found in the femur. What you can find with Ewing's that's pretty unique to it is B symptoms, okay? So you'll have pain in the bone, you'll have B symptoms, which, if you remember, they're the same thing as like if we have a B-cell lymphoma, which is fever, night sweats, weight loss. If you have B symptoms and you have bone findings, Ewing's sarcoma should be on your differential. Ewing's was a BBB boss, the boss. Ewing's the boss. B symptoms. Okay, you diagnose it on X-ray. You see the onion skinning. Ewing, ew, onions, ew, onions, EW, onions. Onions are disgusting. I mean, I personally like them, but you can use this to remember Ewing's sarcoma. Ew for onions. Okay, you'll see elevated ESR. You'll see leukocytosis. You'll see elevated LDH. these are some of the classic lab findings for Ewing's. And biopsy, you'll see small round blue cells. These are characteristic for the tumor cells of Ewing's. They almost look like lymphocytes, so don't get tricked. 1122 translocation, Ewing's sarcoma. All right, you treat this with surgery, and so you send them to the surgeons to deal with it. All right, osteosarcoma. Osteosarcoma is a malignant tumor again. We're in the malignant section, and it's a bone-forming tumor, okay? It forms more bone on top of bone. So what we have here is either you have a primary osteosarcoma or a secondary osteosarcoma. Either the bone is formed during puberty, or it's formed later on in age, and that's the difference between a primary and secondary. This is a metaphysis tumor, so it's in the middle, it's in the growth plate, it's in the long bones, okay? Those are the main things you kind of got to know. You can have B symptoms with this, but it's not as common as with Ewing's. You have pathological fractures in this case, manifestation of pain, just like with Ewing's. And in the x-ray, you'll see the sunburst appearance, the Codman's triangle. So Osteosarcoma is sinister. It likes to ramp up your bone. It ramps you up straight into very bad problems, okay? The one thing you can use to remember this is the acronym SOC. So osteosarcoma is a SOC thing. It's sunburst, osteosarcoma, Codman's triangle, and knee region. So this is usually found in the metaphysis of the knee, SOC. You can remember this kind of like knee-high socks. You are sinister osteosarcoma, sucks. It sucks to have osteosarcoma. All right, and usually these are pretty resistant to radiotherapy, so the prognosis is pretty poor, and you'll have to treat with surgical resection if possible. Chondrosarcoma. So chondrosarcoma, this is one of those tumors that has the moth-eaten appearance. Remember, giant cell tumor is different from this because this is just kind of a flat moth-eaten appearance. Giant cell is a bubble and circular tumor type, okay? This arises from mesenchymal cells that produce cartilage. There's local swelling. There's pathological fractures. So because the chondrocytes are so built up, you have activation of osteoclasts in that area. They induce osteoclast activation in that area, causing the moth-eaten appearance. And these chondrocytes can be malignant and can jump to other bones, okay? All right, and the treatment, as per usual, is surgery. So we've gone through all the malignant bone tumors, our three main ones, and I think that covers all the bone tumors that you primarily need to know. So quick bone tumor review, I guess. Let's jump into something else right now. So let's do, what else can we talk about? Let's talk about something. I actually saw a patient today, and they brought in a chart with interleukin levels on it, which is interesting. So actually, let's go through interleukins, which ones we need to know, which ones are kind of important to know, and which ones we can kind of blow off. So just a very, very quick summary on interleukins. If you remember from step 1 or medical school, you have the acronym HOT, T-bone steak, and that kind of goes through interleukin 1 to 6. So interleukin 1 is hot, it promotes fever. Interleukin 2 is T, the T from T-bone, right? It stimulates proliferation of T cells and differentiation of T cells. T for 2, T for hot T-bone steak. Okay, bone is number 3. It stimulates granulocytes and stem cells in bone, so bone marrow stimulation. Interleukin 4 is IgE. So this is the E in steak. So ST in steak doesn't count for anything. It's EAK, right? But you need the ST to just make it make sense. So interleukin 4 is IgE. Interleukin 5 is IgA class switching. And interleukin 6 is an acute phase reaction, and you can spell acute with the letter K. It's acute. So I guess towards the end of this acronym is kind of pointless, but if it helps you, it helps you. So really, what are the key take-home points for interleukins? Macrophages produce a couple of these interleukins that are important: IL-1, IL-6, IL-8, IL-12, as well as TNF-alpha. So those are the macrophages secreted interleukins. And then T cells create their own interleukins, mainly IL-2 and 3. So these are important for pro-inflammation, for differentiation of your immune system cells. Mainly IL-1 and 6 are your pro-inflammatory ones, the ones you want to look out for mediators of sepsis and pyrogenicity, fevers, and things like that. Okay, so 1 is hot, and so is 6, sort of, right? K is acute phase reactant for 6. Then the most important anti-inflammatory interleukin is interleukin 10. Interleukin 2 and 4 are made by promote the differentiation of T cells. So without those, your T cells will suffer. And then you also have interleukin 4 and 5, which are your class switching ones. Remember, 4 is E, 5 is A, right? From EAK. And then what else do we have to know? Interleukin 8 is a very common chemokine. So out of all of them, 8 brings you to the party. Yeah. That's pretty much it for interleukins, I think. Right? I hope these little mnemonics helped you out a little bit. Just a quick brain refresher on interleukins, because I know when I saw those interleukin levels, I kind of had a moment where I was like, oh man, I wish I'd remembered these as easily. So I went on a very, very quick tangent to review them. Okay. Alright, so what's also another important thing to know besides interleukins? It also starts with I. It's interferons. So interferon alpha, beta, and gamma are the three main ones we have to know about. Alpha and beta are kind of tied together as the type 1 interferons, and gamma is a type 2. Now, alpha is important for things like viral infections, malignancies, and beta is usually important for things like fibroblasts formation. They both work to mount defenses also in terms of viral, so they share that activation. So they activate NK cells, they activate T cells through their mechanism of action. They promote MHC class 1 production, and then they also work to inhibit viral gene synthesis. So if you have a virus, interferons are some of your main defenders of your body. So interferon alpha, what do we use it for? When do we give extra? That's for things like hepatitis, hepatitis B, hepatitis C. Remember, viruses are interferon. Kaposi sarcoma, which is linked to HHV 8, right? Yeah, pretty sure. And then, or is it 6? You guys can correct me down in the comments. I'm drawing a brain blank. Okay, so this is a viral, antiviral. Interferon, it works as an antiviral. Hairy cell leukemia, remember, this is also anti-tumor. So interferon alpha, hairy cell leukemia, hepatitis. You can also use it for things like malignancy and melanoma and renal cell cancers. But just remember, I would mostly focus on the hepatitis and the Kaposi's, because they really like to test those. Interferon beta is used in multiple sclerosis. Okay. All right, multiple sclerosis is an kind of inflammatory, is an anti-autoimmune factor. Interferon gamma. Interferon gamma is used to, it's mainly associated with T helper 1 and NK cells. Okay, so it's produced by those cells when they respond to interleukin 12 during antigen contact. And what happens is interferon gamma and interleukin 12 work within the macrophage to kind of stimulate immunity towards viruses, infected cells, It also works to suppress the Th2 response. It has a negative feedback on that, saying, no, we're doing this. This is an infection. Let the macrophages handle it. Don't suppress them. Okay, so promotes MHC class 2 expression and antigen presentation on these phagocytic cell types. Okay, so remember, type 1 interferons work with MHC class 1, type 2 interferons work with MHC class 2. So A and B work with class 1 and gamma works with type 2. And it also works with antigen switching. So who do you want to give interferon gamma to? Well, it's going to be your CGD, your chronic granulomatous disease, your NADPH oxidase deficiency, and that's because your macrophages are the main formers of granuloma, and stimulating them with interferon gamma and having that IL-12 interaction is going to help the remainder of those macrophages kind of work against these infections as well as they possibly can. Okay. All right. I think that was interferons in a nutshell. What else should we talk about? Let's just jump into our final topic. I've got in-service coming up tomorrow. So as an intern, that's going to go pretty good, but we'll see. Seronegative Spondyloarthropathies, I think, is a good topic. We'll go into more detail, but for now, just remember it's HLA-B27. Why it's called seronegative is because you don't have the rheumatoid factor being expressed, right? It's an arthropathy with negative rheumatoid factor. That's why it's seronegative. And how you remember it is the paramnemonic, so psoriasis, acute anterior uveitis, inflammatory bowel disease, and reactive arthritis. You can also add A for ankylosing spondylitis, so A pair. Or you could switch the A's and make the A ankylosing spondylitis and the first A anterior uveitis. Just remember anterior uveitis, it's very commonly tested, so you want to do a slit lamp exam on these people just to check that uvea for inflammation. Okay, so I hope this was a semi-good review for today. I know it was kind of quick, but we'll continue this in our next episode. I'm going to try to keep these uploads as regular as I can, and I'll see you guys in the next one.